Well, I finally finished Final Fantasy 16 after 65 long hours. I did all the side quests and the hunts. I really try to do everything in the game, and I can finally give my final thoughts on the game Final Fantasy 16. Ever since the game was revealed, I was looking forward to it because I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and just seeing the previews and the trailer, especially the one where you could hear the chorus and they actually are saying the names of the summons from the game, got me so hyped. I specifically remember that trailer got me so hyped. So for the review, I'm going to separate it with different categories, and also it will be spoiler free because I don't want to ruin the story of the game. I want people to experience it for themselves because it's that good. So first I want to go over the graphics. How are they? How are they for a PS5 game? Well, in my opinion, they're not the best for a PS5 game. There is better looking games out there like Horizon Forbidden West and Ratchet and Clank, but they are still incredible graphics. The Final Fantasy franchise are always known for their graphics, and Square Enix did not disappoint. They did an incredible job in this game. What really impressed me was that the whole game has no CGI. It's all in-game graphics. The cutscenes are in-engine made, pre-rendered, and I really didn't notice that towards the end when I'm like, wait, there was no CGI in this game at all. Obviously, it's not as good as CGI cutscenes like they did in the past. I believe the last game they did using CGI cutscenes was Final Fantasy 13, as the mainline Final Fantasy game. I think it was Final Fantasy 13. And yeah, you could say it's still not to that level, the graphics now, but it's pretty damn close. And it actually made me forget that there was no CGI in the game. So that actually did impress me on the graphics itself. And it makes me wonder, how much they would push the graphics on the next game. So next up, I want to go over the world building and level design. This is where I'm kind of mixed feelings on the world building and the level design. First, the world map. I wish there was more traveling instead of just point and click on the world map. There's games like Dragon Quest 11 or Ni no Kuni or stuff like that where you actually have a little avatar that goes to that specific place that you need to go to instead of just point and click. Or you could have done maybe like a Fire Emblem case where you are pointing and clicking, but it actually has like a little avatar going towards that location, instead of just point and click and that's it. Maybe have a little more animation and make it more unique. Now, I do love the art direction they used in this game, but the world itself didn't really wow me. I felt that almost all the different places and the towns looked almost identical. There was some parts where they looked different than the rest, but they didn't really pop out that much and didn't really stick with me that much. There was one specific area where I wish you could interact with the world more because it actually looked pretty good and beautiful at times, but for almost the rest of the game, it was pretty dark, pretty gray, more gray areas and stuff like that, which I get it. That's what they were going for. The aesthetic was that, make it more grim and gray and and stuff like that. So I get it, but at least for me, there was nothing memorable there that made me stop and appreciate the scenery. Like many other Final Fantasies that I played, they had crazy environments and stuff like that made me stop and appreciate the artwork they've done, and this one didn't really have that for me. The level design, for the game is good for what they did. I like the linear of the game and stuff like that, but I just wish on some parts it would open up a little bit more. But overall, the linear is good for this game specifically. Just like I said, in some parts, I feel like they should have opened up a little bit more, Also, when traveling to a specific place, I wish, they had a little mini map instead of opening up the menu all the time to see the map, see where you're at, see where you need to go. Maybe they should have added a little mini map and stuff like that, Now let's go over the meat and potatoes of the game, which is the gameplay. The most controversial part of the whole game, it got people talking, discussing, debating, and for me, it was really good overall. Obviously, it's a different take on other Final Fantasy games, and like I said before, the last traditional game or traditional turn-based game we had was Final Fantasy X, so they've been changing it up ever since. opinions. But first, I want to go over a few things that I didn't like. So first, no item play. I wish it had more item play because it would feel more like there would be more strategy involved if you had item play. But I understand why they didn't implement it, because obviously it would slow down the game so much, you know. And the next thing is similar to the item play, which it could be in the same category, I guess, but it's the lack of status effects. You know, like many other RPG games have status effects where, you know, you get poisoned, you know, sleep, there's weaknesses like fire, ice, you know, thunder and stuff like that. And in this game, you know, there is, you know, ice, thunder and fire and stuff like your summons, but there's no weaknesses, there's no status effect. So it felt kind of pointless to have those summon powers with different kind of elements when there's no elements effects, you know, especially against your enemies that you're fighting, the enemies you're fighting. I mean, it felt pointless that some enemies had ice attacks, but it did nothing to you, or you did nothing to them in terms of, you know, the weakness or the critical hits or whatever. And I get it. It might have slowed down the game even more, because you would have to use, you know, more items and stuff like that. So I get why they removed status effects as a whole, to make, you know, the game more faster and fluent, you know. But it's just something that I did notice, that it felt less of an RPG, more action, true action, which again, I know they went for that since the beginning. They announced that, right? And then the last thing that I wish the game had was a party-based system, a party-based combat. You know, this is the first time in a series where you don't get to control a party, and in my opinion, even with the fast paced on this game, controlling a party would just make it better, you know? There's a lot of great characters in this game that I wish we could control, like Sid, or even controlling, you know, Torgal or something like that would be nice. And it would just, you know, add more to the combat, make it stand out more and stuff like that. But those are my main complaints on the gameplay, you know, the combat. But everything else was great. Like I said before, my favorite kind of gameplay is turn-based and tactics, right? Second is action, but this, for me at least, felt like one of the best action games I have ever played. Yeah, it's lacking, you know, RPG things, RPG elements and stuff like that, and it's more true action, right? More true action than action RPG. But man, the combat in this game is great. I never got bored, you know, doing combos and learning throughout the game, you know, getting different abilities and modifying my kit, you know, just creating different combos, executing them. It felt so satisfying to me to actually get those combos down and then use them, you know, when I'm fighting. So the combos are great, the abilities are great, the summons are great. As an action game, it's up there for me. It's one of the best. Like I said before, it's not party based, but it didn't really affect me that much because it reminded me of Kingdom Hearts gameplay, you know, at some points, and I could tell where the Kingdom Hearts team really helped in this game. Also, some of the boss fights are so intense, and the only recent game that made me feel that way was God of War 18 and God of War Ragnarok, but this game just took it to another level for me, where it actually felt like actual god battles more than God of War, you know. So it's kind of crazy to even think that. I really enjoyed the boss fights. It's one of the best that I've played in a Final Fantasy game. Moving on to the next thing is the music. Man, I swear, Square Enix never disappoints with their music in their video games. Sure, not all their games are the best, you know, that Square Enix creates, but almost every music in their video games are bangers, you know. And Final Fantasy 16 is no different. It might not be the best in the Final Fantasy franchise because, you know, there has been some iconic songs in the franchise, but overall it has great music. And there's one specific one that it always plays in my mind, and it's actually in the beginning of the game, and I'll play it now. I also loved all the different sounds and themes from the Final Fantasy universe, like the victory theme and the OG Final Fantasy theme, you know, reused in different ways and in between the game on the right moments. So I really enjoyed that aspect, bringing back music from the past games into this game. But I could say that there is some parts where it would take me out of the experience in some cases, just a little bit, because some of the music choices they did in some areas that got me confused. But overall the music was great, and I'll be surprised if Final Fantasy 16 doesn't win Music of the Year in the Game Awards. They already took Xenoblade music last year and they didn't win. God of War won. In my opinion, Xenoblade 3 should have won that best music of the year for last year, but whatever. We'll see what happens this year. And for the last thing is the story and characters, with no spoilers, obviously, right? Everyone who played the demo knows how crazy this game's story was gonna be, and I could say that it lived up to that demo hype. Compared to other Final Fantasy games, is up there with some of the best, not the best, but some of the best up there. It did feel more mature, obviously it is M for mature. It has some dark themes, which, almost all Final Fantasy games do have dark themes, but Final Fantasy 16 was the first time they used, gore and they were cussing and using stuff like that, where it actually was surprising to me to see that in a Final Fantasy game. And it did give that Game of Thrones vibe that people were saying. I never watched Game of Thrones, but for me it felt like Lord of the Rings vibe, Vinland Saga, stuff like that. It was great. I have no complaints on the story. It had great pacing throughout the game, and it just gets crazier and crazier, and it actually got me emotional to when I finished the game. And it's funny because my wife saw me tear up a little bit, at the end. So very few games have made me feel that way, so it was great for me to experience this story, and I can't wait for people to experience it for themselves, see what they think. The characters themselves are well written, and they did a great deal of detail on the background of their stories and stuff like that. Especially if you do the side quests of some of the characters, you get to know them more, get more attached to them and stuff like that. Their designs are really cool. I really liked all the designs from the main characters themselves. And it's funny because when I first saw Clive as the protagonist in the trailers, it made me feel like he was an off-brand of Noctis, the protagonist from Final Fantasy 15, and I didn't feel like this protagonist Clive will live up to the hype of the Final Fantasy name, but playing and finishing the game, he is up there with one of my favorite protagonists in the Final Fantasy universe. They did a great job with Clive and his story and his background and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed it. I almost forgot to mention the voice acting in this game is incredible. I really like the voice acting, especially from the main characters like Clive and Jill and all them. Sid, they really did a great job, the voice actors in this game, and they really brought the characters to life. I really enjoyed it all the way through. So I could go on and on about this game, but that would take too long, obviously. So I just want to rate the game now, and I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. For me, it has become one of the top 5 Final Fantasy games. I still don't know where in the top 5, but definitely my top 5. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I feel like this game is a must play, or a game you should buy a PS5 for, especially if you don't have one, or buy it for someone and stuff like that. That's a game to play for sure on the PS5. But what do you guys think? Did y'all play the game? Finish it already? What do y'all think about it? Are you waiting for a sale? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to share, subscribe, and like the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.